Mets are promoting Christian Scott, plus we'll preview Week 7 up next on a Kokomo Friday.
Alcantara, Soroka, you look so good in polka. Peralta, Manoa, bounce back for Aarondola. Giolito, Castillo, Yoshida, Mosuzuka.
and Fado, value so high, but ADP so low. Frank Love's hit some kind of Joe. Now let's get on with the show.
Happy Kokomo Friday and welcome into Fantasy Baseball today on May 3rd. I am Frank Stampfl, joined by Scott White. Today on the show, the Mets are promoting their top pitching prospect, Christian Scott. We had a short slate of games, so we'll take a look at early season trends and league leaders. Plus, we'll preview Week 7 with two-star pitchers and sleeper hitters a little bit later on. But let's jump in.
Can you believe it? Wow!
All right, Scott, who made you say, wow, on Thursday?
Well, since it was a short slate, nobody made me say, wow, that loudly. But I was impressed with Kyle Bradish in his return to the mound. Obviously, prior to spring training, he was diagnosed with a sprained UCL, and there were a lot of concerns. He was just done. He was going to have Tommy John surgery, but the Orioles decided to go the rest and rehabilitation route, which has worked for some pitchers. And Bradish returned, and he looked exactly like the Kyle Bradish we saw last year. He only went 4 2/3 innings, first start back. I think that's reasonable. Allowed 1 earned run, struck out 5, 9 whiffs on 84 pitches. That's a decent whiff rate. But mostly what I was encouraged by was his velocity was fine across the board. And on his rehab assignment, his fastball was down 2 miles per hour on average. So I think maybe it's a good lesson in maybe not overreacting to some of what you're seeing on rehab assignments, because obviously it's a guy with job security who's just tuning up, and his adrenaline level isn't the same, and his effort level may not even be the same. Bradish looked fine, and his velocity was fine, and I think he'll be fine. Well, I don't want to say it that strongly, because the elbow could still bring him trouble. It's going to be hanging there in the back of your mind for the rest of the season, but I wouldn't be afraid to start him going forward. And certainly, if not for that elbow injury, we would have considered him a must start all along.
Yeah, and I was really excited about Kyle Bradish before this injury was diagnosed, early in spring training. He was someone that I think I had him ranked top 25, maybe even top 20.
Me too.
I was really excited about Bradish coming into the season. He has great secondary pitches. He gets whiffs on his slider and his curveball. Velocity has steadily been creeping up the past couple of years. He throws mid-90s with the fastball. So I was very encouraged by this debut as well. He's up to 82% rostered. Could be out there in some really shallow leagues. I do think Kyle Bradish is a must-roster player.
Could be out there in some Yahoo leagues for sure.
You mentioned that he is a start moving forward. He's only 24% started on CBS. This is Kyle Bradish. He's at the Nationals next week. They are 13th in WOBA against right-handed pitching. Are you okay getting him out there against the Nats?
Yeah, I wish his roster rate was 3 percentage points lower, so I could have gotten away with calling him a sleeper pitcher for this week with that matchup against the Nationals. I'm not saying everyone who has Bradish absolutely has to start him, but I think it's a good matchup, and I think he's a good start.
Kyle Bradish, by the way, on Yahoo, 64% rostered, so could be out there in some leagues. If he is, change that. He should not be on any waiver wires. All right, player of the night for me. We're going deep here, Scotty. We're going real deep, because my player of the night is Jon Singleton. If you play on CBS, he's going to be known as Jonathan Singleton. That's right. The player who was given an extension, what was it, a decade ago now, before he made it to the majors. Obviously didn't work out. He was out of baseball for a while. Now he's with the Houston Astros, and it looks like he has a pretty big opportunity ahead of him. He's starting at first base now. The team has sent Jose Abreu back to their complex league, and he has now homered in 2 of his past 3 games. Jon Singleton has. He went 2 for 3 with his second home run in this game on Thursday. He's batting .275. He's got a .787 OPS. The plate discipline looks really good so far in a very small sample size, 12% walk rate, 20% strikeout rate. And the expected numbers look okay. It's a 260 XBA. It's a 430 X slug. Again, this is very deep league stuff. We're talking AL only, 15-team roto leagues where if you're looking for a corner infielder. But Scott, this is cheap exposure to one of the best lineups in baseball. Jon Singleton, your thoughts?
Yeah, before we started recording here, you told me you were going to shock me with your pick for player of the night. And then you mentioned it's Jon Singleton. And I was like, hey, I took a bunch of notes on him as well. Because I noticed with this home run, and second in as many days, you said?
2 in the past 3.
Naturally, I went to the StatCast page and looked at what was going on there. And it's looks pretty good. It looks pretty good. So you mentioned the walk rate. It's 12.7%, which is very high. Singleton's always had a good batting eye. That was part of the reason he was considered a huge prospect and got that multi-year deal before even debuting in the majors all those years ago. He has only a 21.8% strikeout rate. So the plate discipline is great. And then the quality of contact also really good. His max exit velocity, Jon Singleton, is 114.4 miles per hour. Only 14 players have hit a ball harder than that, have hit a ball harder than Jon Singleton this year. And yeah, I think we thought the replacement for Jose Abreu, we thought that's what Joey Loperfido was coming up to do. But Loperfido has only started in the outfield so far with Chas McCormick hurt. And, Chas McCormick, hardly a sure thing. He wasn't off to a good start even before the injury. Neither is Jake Myers, the center fielder. So Loperfido might just become a fixture in the outfield and leave first base for Jon Singleton. So I as you say, it's not like everybody who has a first base need should be going and picking up Jon Singleton. But in those really deep leagues where waiver wire is pretty much empty, there's a chance Singleton might be on it. And judging by the data, I don't think it's so far-fetched to think, particularly with the lineup around him, that maybe eventually he could be somebody we care about even in standard-sized leagues. He's already 32. So, if you're looking to pick him up in a dynasty league, not a lot of runway there. But yeah, Jon Singleton, pretty interesting.
And one other thing I'll add on Jon Singleton. So Joey Loperfido was out of the lineup here on Thursday against the lefty. Singleton was in there. So playing against lefties and righties, it's not like they have a ton of depth pieces right now. They are dealing with injuries. Again, they sent Abreu back to the complex league. And it's a really small sample, but Jon Singleton so far against lefties this year, he's 4 for 11 with one of his 2 home runs. So I thought that was notable. Again, this is really deep league stuff, but Jon Singleton, kind of interesting. Let's get into another prospect spotlight. It's time to discuss some of the prospects who are catching our eye from a fantasy perspective, thanks to our sponsors at Hyundai, where they're thinking about every step of your journey out on the road. For the first time, we're using the prospect spotlight to discuss a player who is being promoted. And you know who it is. The Mets are expected to call up their top pitching prospect, Christian Scott, this weekend to face the Tampa Bay Rays. He's a big righty at 6'4", soon to be 25 years old, in 5 starts at AAA this year, a 3.20 ERA, a .71 WHIP, 36 strikeouts over 25 and a third innings. It's a 4-pitch mix, a 4-seam fastball, which averages 94.5 miles per hour, a sweeper, a traditional slider, and a changeup. Christian Scott has great command overall. If there is a flaw here, Scott, home runs. So far this season, 7 home runs in 5 starts. But prior to this year, home runs were not an issue. So just could be a small blip, whatever's going on with Christian Scott. He's 32% rostered. Your thoughts on the pitcher, and is he a must-add in fantasy leagues?
Well, the fly ball rate is very high, so I imagine he is going to struggle with home runs. But it may be a situation sort of like Shota Imanaga, Not that it's realistic to aim quite that high for Scott yet, but the overall profile in terms of the three true outcomes stats, the walks, the strikeouts, the home runs, or at least the potential for home runs, the vulnerability to home runs, very reminiscent of Shota Imanaga. And I would say that I care in general of those three contributions. I care more about strikeouts and walks than home runs. Home runs is third for me in terms of priority when evaluating pitchers. So, reason to be excited here. It kind of surprises me that now is when he's getting the call because Jose Budo is coming off a great start. He seems to have solidified his place in the Mets rotation. There isn't nothing has happened to create an opening. It's possible he's going to take Adrian Hauser's place, but Adrian Hauser got another start here on Thursday, even after the news Scott was coming up. And Adrian Hauser, the Mets GM had him in Milwaukee and has voiced a lot of confidence in him. And I don't know. Hauser seems like the only choice to remove if they're going to remove anybody. But then even if you assume they're removing Hauser, Tyler McGill and David Peterson just began rehab assignments and are going to be back soon enough. So there's going to be it's the Mets have a lot of options, or are going very soon to have a lot of options for their starting rotation, which isn't to say this is a one and done for Scott. I don't think we know that either way, but it is to say he doesn't have a high margin for error. Like he needs to come up and he needs to deliver right away if he's going to stick around. But I think he's basically must add. I think the upside, the strikeout potential justifies that. I mean, for as good as his numbers look this year, last year in the minors, he had a swinging strike rate comparable to Spencer Strider and a strike percentage comparable to George Kirby. He was like top of the scales in both. Hasn't been quite as good. Like the like K per 9 rate has been awesome at AAA. The swinging strike rate hasn't been quite as good this year for Scott, but I'm kind of nitpicking there. Obviously, there's a lot of strikeout potential and a lot of reason to be excited. So I moved him up to 66th in my starting pitcher rankings, which is ahead of pitchers like Nestor Cortez and Aaron Savale.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, pretty aggressive, right?
Yeah.
But it's behind, not remembering now who it's behind. It's behind.
You have him right behind the exact names I was going to ask you about, Fetty and Olsen, right behind those two.
Yeah, the two that have been trending on the waiver wire this week. And I think that's a very close call. It might depend on the league circumstances. The shallower the league, I think the more you can pursue the upside of Scott over Fetty and Olsen. But the thing is, I think Fetty and Olsen have upside too.
Right.
Which is why I ultimately decided to slot Scott behind them. Let's see. That also puts Scott behind Kyle Bradish and Jordan Montgomery, Nathan Eovaldi, who had a good start here on Thursday. Carlos Rodon, though, I may be hedging on that. But like we talked about on yesterday's show, the 20 to 60 range starting pitcher, or really, I guess 20 to 70 range if I'm putting Scott outside the top 60. There's a lot of elasticity, I guess would be the word in that group. Hard to differentiate that among that very large group of starting pitchers. So after Scott's first start, maybe he'll move up 20 spots. Or maybe he'll get blasted like Jack Leiter did in his debut and get sent down right away. Hopefully not. I think the odds are better of Scott sticking around and performing well than Leiter, but you just never know.
So I moved Christian Scott up to 77th in my starting pitcher ranks, and he is just behind Reese Olson. I have Eric Fetty up at 69. Nice. So Christian Scott is behind both of those names for me as well. And I felt like they were the two most exciting waiver wire pitchers this week, and they are both still available too. So I would rank Christian Scott behind those names as well. I'm going to throw three other names at you, Scott. Would you drop any of these for Christian Scott? James Paxton, Michael King, Christopher Sanchez.
The first two easily, Michael King, and who was the first one you said?
Paxton, King, and Sanchez.
Yeah, Paxton, get him out of there.
Mm-hmm.
The one I might hedge on a little bit is Christopher Sanchez, but I do rank Christian Scott 3 spots ahead of Christopher Sanchez. So I kind of have Sanchez in that same group with Cortez and Savale, where, yeah, I don't really want to drop them, but I don't think they have their upside is that comparable to Scott. So I probably would make that move if I had to.
Again, the Mets' top pitching prospect, Christian Scott, getting called up this weekend, and he was one of Scott White's top 5 prospects on the Verge this week. Make sure to check out the latest prospect report, which is live on the site, cbssports.com/fantasy/baseball. Thanks again to Hyundai for sponsoring this segment and the show. Learn more at HyundaiUSA.com. Quick reminder, download and follow our 5-minute podcast, FBT in 5. We have a bonus prospect episode coming out each Saturday of the season. You can find FBT in 5 wherever you listen to podcasts. Let's take our first break. When we return, we'll get to the news and notes right after this.
From the world of Sonic the Hedgehog, is there anyone stronger?
No.
Tougher?
No.
Hungrier?
Grapes was an interesting choice for someone who doesn't use fingers.
Knuckles, now streaming only on Paramount Plus.
Welcome back in. Let's talk news and notes. Gerrit Cole is expected to throw a bullpen session Saturday. His first time throwing off a mound since landing on the IL with nerve irritation in his right elbow. He's reportedly targeting a return in mid-June. All right, that's more like it. Give us information. Something we can actually work with here, Yankees.
That's a later timetable than what they were giving, just like a week or two ago.
True.
And it does concern me a little just because players don't usually beat the timeline they're aiming for. That's usually like the best case scenario. So I don't know. I don't take it as great news that he's aiming for mid-June, but it's the best we're going to get.
Jesus Luzardo threw a successful bullpen on Thursday. He'll make a rehab start sometime during the Marlins' upcoming road trip. And it feels like they might be pushing Luzardo a little bit too fast. They placed him on the IL last Friday with a mild left flexor strain. But if it's as mild as they're leading on, then maybe he's all right. So
what do you know, Frank? Too fast. Look at this guy. What do you know?
I don't know anything. I've never injured my left flexor or anything like that. So hopefully I'm wrong. And Jesus Luzardo is perfectly fine. Walker Buehler will officially make his season debut on Monday against the Marlins, his first major league start in about 20 months. Scott, will he be a 2-star pitcher? And if so, do you start him?
Of course he would be a 2-star pitcher right away. So if you've ever looked at my 2-star pitcher rankings, you know I have these different tiers. Must start is one, advisable in most cases is another, points league only is another, and then no thanks is the last one. I had to put Walker Buehler in the points league only one. There's just too many uncertainties here. I hate that it's 2 starts right away because it's so tempting to use him. But he's another one. Velocity was down on his rehab assignment. Hopefully it goes like Kyle Bradish and he comes up throwing as hard as we remember Walker Buehler throwing. But like I mentioned on yesterday's show, he was gearing up to return late last year, and the Dodgers didn't like how it was going, shut him down. It's taken him a long time to get to a point where he's getting the call now. I don't take any of that as a good sign. I take it as the Dodgers are concerned about something they're seeing with him. And coming back from second Tommy John surgery, that leaves a lot of room for doubt too. Hoping for the best for Walker Buehler, but I don't think you can put him in your lineup right away, except in points leagues. And even then, it's a question.
Merrill Kelly was transferred to the 60-day IL, which means he'll be out until at least late June. He is on the IL with a teres major strain in his right shoulder. Nathan Eovaldi was removed from his start with right groin tightness. Paul Skeens' next start will come Sunday at AAA. Womp, womp. Scott, you weren't here the other day, but after his 6-inning start, I made the bold prediction that his next start would be with the Pirates, and turns out I was wrong.
I made my own bold prediction in the prospects report, not being familiar with your bold prediction. My bold prediction was 1, maybe 2 more starts at AAA.
Mm-hmm.
And obviously that hasn't been proven wrong yet, so maybe it'll be right. But yeah, it's going to be soon. Skeens is rostered in almost all leagues already, but if he doesn't, if you happen to be in one where he isn't, then remedy that now.
Matt McLain, who had shoulder surgery back in March, is about a week away from a follow-up appointment that will give the Reds a better idea of his timetable. Manager David Bell said the goal is still early August, ideally, for Matt McLain. Christian Javier will begin a minor league rehab assignment this weekend. He's on the IL with neck discomfort. Nick Pivetta could rejoin the Red Sox rotation next week against the Braves. That would be either May 7th or 8th. He made a rehab start and was not very good. 3 innings, 4 runs allowed, 4 walks, 5 strikeouts. But as we pointed out with Kyle Bradish, maybe it doesn't matter that much.
Well, and interestingly enough, Nick Pivetta had some harsh words for the ABS system in the minors, saying he hopes it never comes to the majors.
Wow.
After walking 4 in his minor league start. So I don't know exactly what part of it he didn't like. Or what his gripe is. I know he's not the first major league pitcher to gripe about it, but I thought it was noteworthy.
Yeah, I think it's still a work in progress, and it must be pretty bad if any pitcher prefers Angel Hernandez over the ABS system.
Well, that's just one umpire, to be fair.
Yes, true. Gavin Williams resumed throwing on Thursday. He's in the IL with right elbow discomfort. Joey Loperfido was out of the lineup Thursday against a lefty, as we mentioned. Brian Bayo will begin a rehab assignment with AA on Tuesday. Braxton Garrett threw 5 scoreless innings in his latest rehab start at AAA on Thursday. TJ Friedl was sent to AAA on Thursday to begin a rehab assignment. He's 51% rostered. Scott, would you consider TJ Friedl a must stash?
I see what you did there. Stroking your own mustache. I had to mention it because most people are listening and not watching. Anyway, TJ Friedl, yes, I would say, given the state of the outfield, he should be rostered in far more than 51% of leagues, certainly in roto leagues. Given the stolen base contribution he could make. But even in points leagues, I mean, he was productive as a points league outfielder last year. Start worthy. He's the guy who we haven't talked about TJ for a long time, but he had the.
It's that time of night, Scott. We got you cutting out.
Gosh.
Are you here?
Is it like a 1 o'clock thing?
It might.
Is it like a 1 o'clock? They do like a 1 o'clock reset or something?
It might be exactly that.
Yeah.
I don't know.
All right. Hopefully I'm here to stay now. But yeah, it's been a long time since we talked about TJ Friedl. He's the guy who had like what was it, like 2% average exit velocity, but the power play is up at home and he just seems to have a lot of bat control and makes use of his speed and should be good. He should be good. And he's worth stashing now that he's beginning a rehab assignment.
All right, Masataka Yoshida might require surgery on his injured left thumb. Jordan Hicks has been cleared to start Friday against the Phillies. He left his previous start with side tightness. Justin Lawrence is expected to go on the paternity list on Friday. Vaughn Grissom is on track to make his Red Sox debut on Friday against the Twins. He's 43% rostered if you do need middle infield help. If Vaughn Grissom clicks and I think he works out to the best of his ability, it's going to be a good batting average, probably modest power and speed as well. Albert Suarez has been shifted to the Orioles bullpen with Kyle Bradish and John Means back. Means, by the way, will make his season debut Saturday in Cincinnati. And wanted to quickly mention a prospect who is on fire right now. There are lots of them. I know Junior Caminero has been blasting home runs. Kyle Manzardo, same thing. Orioles prospect Kobe Mayo went 2 for 6 with his 11th home run on Thursday. He has homered in 4 straight games. He also has a 27% strikeout rate. Scott, where does Kobe Mayo rank? Let's just call that the top hitter trio right now between Caminero, Manzardo, and Mayo. And obviously Holiday is up there too.
Yeah, I'm beginning to wonder if Mayo will come up before Holiday comes back, given how much his strikeout rate has normalized to AAA. It was bloated at first, but a really high-end power here from Kobe Mayo, and obviously Jordan Westberg can switch between second and third, so it's not like Holiday meets a positional need that Mayo doesn't. I'm going to put Mayo fourth of that group for now, but it's a tight group. So I'm going to say Holiday is the most stashable, followed by Caminero, followed by Kyle Manzardo, followed by Kobe Mayo. But they're all on near equal footing.
Mm-hmm. All right, you heard it from Scott himself. Hold the Mayo. What do we do with these pitchers? Edward Cabrera gave us the full Edward Cabrera experience on Thursday against the Rockies in Miami. I mean, just a perfect setup. It kind of feels like with Cabrera, either you or Chris have said this before, the matchup doesn't matter. It just comes down to Edward Cabrera. If he's good, he could dominate anybody. If he's Edward Cabrera, then he's probably going to struggle. 4 innings, 4 runs, 4 walks, 9 strikeouts with 16 swinging strikes on 91 pitches. That first start against the Giants he had was great, but since then it's 13 1/3 innings, 12 earned runs, 9 walks, 20 strikeouts. He's got an ERA over 6. The underlying numbers still look really good. Scott, what do we do with Edward Cabrera? He's still 65% rostered. I don't think there's any way you could start him at the Dodgers next week. Would you drop him for somebody like Christian Scott?
And maybe he'll dominate the Dodgers.
He might.
Because it's, you never know what the Charizard's going to give you. Yeah, I don't know what you can do with Edward Cabrera, because if you can't play the matchups with him, doesn't seem like. He's going to have some great starts, but the overall stat line is, if it goes the way his whole career has gone, is not going to be good enough to justify keeping him in your lineup either. So if you can't play matchups, you can't keep him in your lineup. You're just keeping him around, hoping that at some point, finally, he breaks through and finds some consistency and is able to get the most out of this massive strikeout upside. But I'm not sure that's worth doing in like 12-team leagues. 15-teamer, the waiver wire is so bad that, okay, yeah, just stash him on your bench and hope for the best. But would I drop Edward Cabrera for Christian Scott? Yeah, I think rather easily.
Yeah, I would do it too. Scott, as soon as we give Carlos Rodon some credit, he comes out and has his worst start of the season at the Baltimore Orioles. 4 innings, 7 runs allowed, 6 of those were earned, 0 walks, 6 strikeouts, 3 homers allowed. This was a mixed bag. Mm-hmm. I watched a lot of this start. He gave up a lot of hard contact. He gave up 3 home runs. Obviously, those are problems. 6 walks to 0 strikeouts. That's obviously really good over 4 innings. And the slider looked really good again. This is now 2 starts in a row where his slider had exactly 7 whiffs. So look, there's no sugarcoating it. This was a bad start. There's no doubt about that. And I think I kind of told people earlier in the week, like, you don't want to start him against the Orioles. They're really good against lefties. They're a great lineup. What do we do with Carlos Rodon? Because next week he's up against the Houston Astros. I don't think I want to start him there either.
Yeah, I wouldn't say that I have a ton of optimism, a ton of faith in Carlos Rodon at this point, even though he has good ERA for the season. The last couple starts, the slider has looked better, as you say. That's really what I'm clinging to. Is I'm not sure he's much of anything without the slider. But if he's getting whiffs on that slider, then maybe Carlos Rodon can be good enough to keep 2022 Carlos Rodon again. Oh,
Scott, you're breaking up again.
Of course I am. Of course, Frank. Am I still here?
All right, you are here. You got cut off somewhere in the middle of the Rodon
Like,
analogy.
I'm not, just so everybody knows, everything is hardwired, okay? I'm not doing anything wirelessly. There's no Bluetooth in the works. I got just a standard pair of earbuds here. It's nothing. It's beyond my understanding, but it's none of the normal things, okay? Okay. Sorry. I know it's frustrating to listen to. It's frustrating to be a part of.
Don't worry. On the audio side, I try my best to clean it up. So
okay. All right. Well, I just made it harder for you there then.
On video, on video. There's nothing we could do. I guess, would you try your best to bench Carlos Rodon next week, I guess?
Okay. So what's his matchup?
He is home against the Astros.
I'd rather sit him. Yeah. I'm saying I'm willing to hold on to him, but I think 2021, 2022, that's beyond the reach here. It's just a question of, will Carlos Rodon's slider be good enough to make him useful in fantasy still? I think that's all we're hoping for. And I'm willing to hold out that hope still, given the way the sliders performed in the last 2 starts. But it's like I said, I'm not a huge Carlos Rodon optimist at this point.
Kyle Harrison was at the Red Sox on Thursday, and the command escaped him here. It was 5 innings, 1 run, 5 walks to 7 strikeouts. He did have 13 swinging strikes on 95 pitches. 10 of those came on the fastball, and he's still very reliant on that fastball, but he's starting to use his slurve a little bit more over the past few starts. Overall, it's a 3.79 ERA. It's a 129 whip. I think we're obviously holding Kyle Harrison where we have him. He's 61% started on CBS and looks like he's in line for 2 starts next week. 1 at home against the Reds and 1 in Coors Field. What do you think about Kyle Harrison?
I have him in that points league only tier of my 2-start pitcher rankings. Not loving what he's doing so far anyway. It doesn't seem like he has much beyond that fastball. And, this start, he walked a bunch of guys, obviously. And then he has a start at Coors Field among his 2 starts next week. So I wouldn't risk it in a categories league, but in a points league, I could see doing it.
All right, Nathan Eovaldi left with injury, but he pitched well before leaving this one. 5 1/3 shutout, 2 hits, 2 walks, 8 strikeouts with 12 swinging strikes. Velocity was down a touch across the board. It's something we always have to watch with Nathan Eovaldi. But he has exactly 8 strikeouts in 4 of 7 starts this season. And overall, he's been really good. Hopefully he's all right, because next week it looks like he's scheduled at the Oakland A's, also at Coors Field. What do you think about starting Eovaldi next week?
I think you should start him as long as he's healthy. And his 2-start status is questionable because the A's and he's scheduled to go Tuesday. The A's and Rangers are both playing 7 games. Normally the Tuesday starter would go again Sunday in a 7-game week. But the only reason the Rangers have 7 games is because they're facing the A's in a doubleheader on Wednesday, then have an off day Thursday. So they could just stay on regular turn. And in that case, Eovaldi would line up for a second start, but they could call up an extra pitcher to start the second game of the doubleheader, and then everybody gets pushed back a day, and Eovaldi ends up being only a 1-start pitcher. But even if he's a 1-start pitcher, it would be against Oakland.
Yeah.
And I can't imagine sitting him in that scenario.
All right, let's take our final break. When we return, let's give some credit where it's due. We'll do that right after this.
2 big boys getting ready to play. Big being the operative word here. And here they come.
Welcome back in. Let's give credit to 3 hitters we have not talked much about. Jose Altuve had himself a game here on Thursday, 3 for 5 with 2 steals. On the season, he is batting .352, 7 homers, 23 runs scored, 6 steals, and an OPS just over 1,000. Entering this game, he was averaging 3.9 fantasy points per game, 3rd best at second base, and the 22nd overall player in Roto. He has been awesome, as has Jeremy Pena, his teammate, who is off to a great start. 2 for 3 with a triple, 3 runs, and an RBI. He is batting .333 with 3 homers and 5 steals early in the season. 99th percentile in sprint speed for Pena. There was talks this offseason of him changing his swing, and so far, that has come to fruition. Lots more line drives, a lot less ground balls than we've seen in years past. So really like what I'm seeing from Jeremy Pena. And same thing could be said for Ryan Mountcastle, who went 2 for 4 with his 5th home run. He's batting .290. He's got an .840 OPS. We know the story by now. He hits the ball hard. He barrels it up. If he played in any other ballpark besides Baltimore, he would probably be a 30 home run hitter, but he probably will be dragged down because of that. Scott, anything you'd like to add on Mountcastle, Pena, and Jose Altuve?
Well, it's good to see Altuve's running again for a 2nd straight year. That part of his game was eliminated for a few years. He's always been a big Jose Altuve guy, and he's living up to it again. it seems like he's been underrated ever since the cheating scandal, but he's great. He's, I think, the clear number 2 second baseman in fantasy after Mookie Betts, who most people probably aren't using at second base anyway. Jeremy Pena is worth talking about here because we didn't mention it when we were doing our rankings review segment on the other day. But Pena has moved up a lot for me. He's moved past like Carlos Correa in my shortstop rankings. I think he's 18th now, and I'd like to get him higher. It's just there are so many quality shortstops. That's as high as I could go with it. You mentioned that he's elevating the ball more, as was the design this offseason. He's also striking out at just a 13.7% rate. It's 92nd percentile. So much better contact, much more useful contact, and with a swing overhaul backing it up. That's the sort of both skill change and process change, both double whammy. The sort of changes that I think give me reason to buying into him as a new player and not necessarily regressing to the mean. And he's a fast runner, capable of stealing bases, has 5 of them already. I think the arrow's definitely pointing up on Jeremy Pena.
Yeah, I'm happy you brought up that plate discipline, the strikeout rate being down, but even the stuff under the hood, the zone contact is elite, 92.6%. His swinging strike rate is a career best 12.5%. He chases pitches a lot. That's always going to be a part of Jeremy Pena's game, but if he can make contact within the zone at this rate, yeah, I think we're definitely onto something again this season with Jeremy Pena. Do any of these deep league outfielders matter for fantasy? Available on the waiver wire. Pete Crow Armstrong actually off to a solid start here with the Cubs. He went 2 for 4 with 2 RBI. Also has 1 homer, 1 steal so far. Batting .292 through 9 games so far with the Chicago Cubs. And Will Brennan has picked things up lately for the Guardians. He went 3 for 4 on Thursday. Over his last 13 games, he is batting .289 with 4 home runs. And like Stephen Kwan, Will Brennan has not been a power hitter in the past. So I think he might be part of this overarching Guardians philosophy this season where they're trying to get these contact hitters to tap into their power a little bit more. And so far, Will Brennan is doing that. Scott, any interest here in deeper leagues with Brennan and Crow Armstrong?
I'm not ready to sing a different tune on Crow Armstrong yet, though, of course, just looking at his minor league numbers, looking at his prospect pedigree, there's a chance he could emerge as a quality fantasy option. I just think it's too early to say that. I do like that he's playing as much as he is because I didn't even think that was a guarantee. And look, Crow Armstrong's worth rostering over Will Brennan, but I like a lot of what I'm seeing from Will Brennan, who is enough of a base stealer that any amount of power could make him worthwhile. And specifically what I'm seeing from Will Brennan, fly ball rate is up. Pull rate is up too. It's up from 35% to 49%, according to Fangraphs, from one year to the next. And guys who don't have a lot of raw power, who don't impact the ball especially hard, the way they get power is by elevating to their pull side specifically. And that's what Brennan is doing. So the 4 home runs he's hit so far jibes with that. Doesn't strike out much. You know, he could be kind of like 80% of what Stephen Kwan is. I think that's possible. Will Brennan.
Yeah, I think so as well. I noticed a lot of the same things that you did, and his average exit velocity this season up to 89.7 miles per hour, which might not sound great, but last year it was 85.7. So it is up 4 miles per hour year over year. Yeah. Maybe he's just hot, but I don't know. I'm kind of buying into this Guardians philosophy change. So, and
if he does emerge as something in fantasy, you know what we can do? Will Brennan.
What is that?
The buy men and jingle for Will Brennan.
I feel like you've brought this up maybe
I
last
did.
year, and I had no.
I did.
Of course, I had no idea what it was. So
It's funny. Like I was. So when I was a kid, the version of it I heard was Will Brennan. But there's an older version where they elongate the first syllable there, and it's Will Brennan.
if he becomes a thing, Scott, I will. I'll download the audio drop and
Okay.
we'll make that a thing.
Which one though? The longer, or the short?
Whichever you prefer.
Okay.
Completely up to you. I will also leave this up to you, Scott. Do you want to get to the Week 7 preview now, or do you want to talk early season trends? I don't really want to rush through it. Not that there's a lot to talk about, but you are now the producer. What would you like to do? Week 7 preview or early season trends?
Let's go with the early season trends first.
All right, let's run through this. There's not too much going on, but did want to quickly point out to this point in the season, the league batting average is 239. Around this same point last year, it was 247. I think teams have become a little bit smarter in terms of positioning players in this shift ban environment. So I think that's part of the reason why the batting average is down so far. Home run to fly ball ratio this season, 10.7%. At this point last year, it was 12.3%. So home runs so far are down. Steals are up again. 688 steals so far. Around this point last year, it was 652. This season, all of baseball is on pace for 3,579 steals. Last year, it was 3,503. So not a huge uptick, but by season's end, Scott, we could see even more steals. And it kind of feels that way early on as well.
Yeah, not a huge uptick. So I don't know that I take anything away from that. I did theorize that players might even be more accustomed to this rule now and have a better game plan for taking advantage of it, specifically base runners, and that we might see steals continue to trend up for as historic as the increase was last year. I was saying there wasn't going to be a regression to the mean there and might continue the other way. And so far, I guess we're kind of seeing that, but not by a significant enough number to say that it's for sure going to happen.
Let's take a look at the league leaders a month into the season. At batting average, it is Mookie Betts, who's batting 377. Alec Boehm all the way up at 362. He's off to a great start so far. Runs scored. Ronald Acuna and Mookie Betts are tied for 29, which is kind of scary because Acuna, Olsen, and Austin Riley really have not started going yet. Like, they're not even hitting to their capabilities, and Ronald Acuna is still tied for the league lead in runs scored. So,
and the Braves are a top 5 offense still for their 3 best players not hitting at all.
That is just, I mean, I guess things will even out, right? Maybe some of the other guys will come down a little bit, but
Marcell Ozuna will cool off, Travis d'Arnaud.
Right.
But still.
It's crazy. It's pretty crazy. The home run leaders, Gunnar Henderson and Mike Trout, are tied with 10 home runs each. And I was looking through the rankings, Scott. Have you given any thought to moving Henderson ahead of names like Austin Riley and Devers at third base and ahead of Seager and Lindor at shortstop?
I've given thought to it. Yeah. I wish Gunnar Henderson, I wish we were seeing some improvement with the strikeout rate. It's still pretty high. And so I'm not sure he's going to continue to be this much better than he was last year when, he was very good still, obviously. So there's more of a track record there with Lindor and Devers, and who is someone else you mentioned?
Austin Riley.
Riley. Yeah, I mean, Austin Riley especially. It's not unthinkable. I mean, certainly if Gunnar Henderson continues this pace, he'll be right up there with them. He provides steals in a way somebody like Riley and Devers don't. But I think those other guys are going to regress to their normal numbers. There's no reason for me to believe they won't. And that still puts, if they do regress to their normal numbers, that still puts the pressure on Henderson to be this good the rest of the way, which he could be. But I'm gonna bet against it for now.
One other thing I'll point out with Henderson that I have loved to see so far this season, because I've been skeptical in the past. Against lefties, he is batting .313 this year with 3 of his 10 home runs and a .997 OPS. So clearly he's worked on that, and so far he's been really good against lefties. We'll see if he can keep it up. The RBI leader is Marcell Ozuna with 32, and right behind him is Alec Boehm with 30. Stolen bases, Elly De La Cruz has 18. Bryce Terang is second with 14. Just wanted to mention Elly De La Cruz's 162 game pace right now. 41 homers, 141 runs, 99 RBI, and 94 stolen bases. I would take the under, but just to put in perspective how bonkers his first month has been.
Yeah. What if we get another 40-70 guy? What if it's a 40-90 guy?
While I was writing it down, I thought exactly that, right? Like,
Yeah.
Are we going to get a 40-80 player this season?
Again, I would bet no. I think Elly De La Cruz is due for a significant cool-off period here. But this is within his skill set. And the reason I wasn't willing, obviously the high strikeout rate, what he did in the second half last year, too many ground balls. I understand that's what was preventing us from calling him a first rounder. But I never went as far as calling him a bust this preseason, because I knew if anything was going to be there for Elly De La Cruz, he was going to steal a ton of bases, and so many bases that even if he hits like 230, he was still probably going to be a pretty high end player in fantasy. And so that's the one part of this skill set that, or this stat line so far, that I'm most optimistic will continue. Not that he's going to steal 94 bases, but he's going to steal 60 plus. I think I feel pretty safe saying, and yeah, he can afford to lose a lot of points on the batting average and slow the home run pace quite a bit and still be a really high end player in fantasy.
Good on you, Scotty, for not calling Elly De La Cruz a bust like this guy, a big old dummy who called Elly De La Cruz a bust this year. Last thing I'll point out on him, I've watched a few at-bats this year. Much improved plate discipline. I know he's striking out a lot, but his ability to read balls and strikes, he's just putting together much more quality at-bats, and he's walking more. He's been more patient. So I did want to give Elly De La Cruz credit in regards to that part of his game, because he's been much improved in that department. The ERA leaders, this one is always fun 1 month into the season. Here are your top 10 ERA leaders. Shota Imanaga, Ranger Suarez, Jose Barrios, Ronaldo Lopez, Cutter Crawford, Jordan Hicks, Seth Lugo, Tanner Houck, Ronel Blanco, and Spencer Turnbull. None of those players had an ADP inside of the top 150 entering the season. So there you go. Unpredictability in the pitching department. That is what we have had so far this season, and like that, and I would say most seasons early on as well. The whip leader is Ranger Suarez with a .63 whip. Tarek Skubal behind him with a .74. The wins leaders, Tyler Glasnow, Imanaga, Seth Lugo, Ranger Suarez each have 5. And how about this? 2 relievers already have 5 wins as well. Reed Garrett and AJ Minter. Kind of interesting. The strikeouts leaders, there are 3 with 50 plus. Tyler Glasnow has 53, Zach Wheeler with 52, and good old Jack Flaherty with 50. And the saves leaders, we have 4 with 10 saves. Kyle Finnegan, Ryan Helsley, Clay Holmes, Robert Suarez. I know I just kind of sped through the pitching leaders. Scott, was there anything notable? The ERA leaders this early, it's just kind of hilarious.
Yeah, I mean, we've talked a lot about how Ranger Suarez, there's regression coming for him in all likelihood, how this success seems to be driven by just impeccable command and locating his changeup down in the zone. And especially given his history as a suspect control pitcher, I don't think he's going to be able to sustain that all year, which isn't to say he's not going to remain must roster. He could end up with a low 3s ERA, but I don't think Ranger Suarez is going to continue to perform like an ace. If I could go back to the hitters, one observation, because I'm not sure we've talked about Alec Boehm much, unless it was a day I wasn't on. But Alec Boehm has gotten his batting average well over 300. He had something like 9 multi-hit games over an 11-day span. It may even be longer now. So incredibly hot. Your batting average is going to climb into the 360 range when you're doing something like that this early in the season. Worth noting, it was in the low 200s before the start of that stretch. So That's how quickly things can change. But I'm not really seeing anything different in terms of a skill change for Alec Boehm. I'd be encouraged if, and I'd be willing to buy into the possibility that he's legitimately improved if he was elevating more, if he was pulling more, if his batted ball profile had changed such that I felt like he could maximize his power potential. But he's still doing, the way his spray angle, let's call it, is still basically what it's always been. His plate discipline hasn't really changed. I think he's just hot. And in the Phillies lineup, a good contact hitter like him could end up with a nice RBI total still, but I would consider him a sell high and more like a second tier player at first base or third base than a true stud there.
The only things I'll add on Alec Boehm, and these are marginal at best. The ground ball rate is a career low 40%. It was 42% last year. He is hitting more line drives than ever before. He's always been good at that. The walk rate is up to 11.4%. We've never really seen that aspect of Alec Boehm's game. So
that's fair.
He's been more patient. Maybe he's just, recognizing the pitch to hit more and obviously doing damage on those pitches. The expected numbers are awesome too. 322 XBA, 517 X slug. Even with all of that, he has a 409 BABIP, which is not sustainable. But this could turn out to be a career year for Alec Boehm. Maybe one where he hits 300 with low 20s home runs and 100 RBI. That's a really good player. It's not a...
Yeah, I mean, if he does...
not like a fantasy superstar, let's call it.
If he does that, it'll be really good. But yeah. I do think that's kind of the best case scenario. I think more likely 280 to 290 range with about 20 homers, probably not many runs, because I don't think he's going to continue to walk at this rate. But yeah, just want to say that about him since he was so hot this weekend. There were so many pitchers to talk about. We didn't get a chance to bring up Alec Boehm, but I do think he's a regression candidate.
Let's get into the Week 7 preview, and we will start things off with the schedule. Next week, 11 teams with 7 games. There are 14 teams with 6 games, and there are 5 unlucky teams with 5 games next week. The Braves, the Orioles, the Red Sox, the Blue Jays, and the Nats. If you're worrying about the hitters, obviously you continue to roll with the elite guys, the must-start hitters, even if they're struggling, the Austin Rileys, the Matt Olsons of the world. The fringe names maybe have a couple more decisions there, but I think for the most part, just don't overthink it when it comes to the 5-game players. What's on schedule for the Rockies? We have 6 home games, all in Coors Field, obviously, 3 against the Giants and 3 against the Rangers for next week. Starter sit these fringe 2-star pitchers. We mentioned a lot of these already. Nathan Eovaldi might be a 2-star pitcher. Kyle Harrison, Walker Buehler, I asked you about those. The only other one on this list, Scott, Mitch Keller. He's been shaky this season. He's got 2 starts at home, 1 against the Angels and 1 against the Cubs. What do you think about next week?
I think given that Mitch Keller hasn't given us, I was about to say he hasn't given us a good start yet, but he did have 2 that were good. But mostly it's been pretty meh. And so in categories leagues, I wouldn't want to risk the damage to my ERA and whip in a 2-start week. I think I'd just leave Mitch Keller for points leagues.
All right. 2-star pitchers to add and stream for next week. All of these names are under 80% rostered. Who are they?
So this is one of those weeks where I feel obliged to say that what we're doing here is not giving you a bunch of must-start recommendations. This is me making chicken salad out of chicken scratch, let's say. And just understand that, because I don't have a lot of conviction with any of these recommendations. They're just the best we can do among those rostered in less than 80% of CBS sports leagues. So number 1 on the list is Tristan McKenzie, which if you heard Chris's analysis of Tristan McKenzie yesterday, you'll understand why I just gave that little introduction there. But his control has been much better in his last 2 starts than it was prior to that. And the results have been decent. And this week he gets Detroit and the White Sox. So 2 really good matchups. I think He's the best you can do as far as 2-start sleepers go. Tristan McKenzie. Tyler Anderson, of course, has pitched well. I don't believe it at all. I don't believe he can sustain it, but he's at Pittsburgh and against the Royals this week. I consider those matchups to be pretty good. The Pirates especially have cooled off quite a bit from early this season. There's also Luis Heel against the Astros and at the Rays. So not the greatest matchups, but those offenses haven't performed up to our expectations so far, I think is fair to say. And Heel gets a lot of strikeouts, if nothing else. Colin Ray, don't believe in what he's doing at all either. I think one of his ERA estimators, I think it's xERA, is over 6. But the actual results have been fine for Colin Ray so far, and he's at Kansas City versus St. Louis. Good matchups there. Logan Allen, same matchups as Tristan McKenzie, Tigers and White Sox. I don't know that he's given us a good start yet, but those matchups are good enough that at least in points leagues, I'd give Logan Allen a look. And finally, Patrick Sandoval coming off a good start at Pittsburgh versus the Royals. Again, that's more of a points league play. Interesting case here with Jose Budo, who I think is just going to be a 1-start pitcher, but it's at St. Louis, the 3rd worst offense in terms of runs scored. There's a chance he's a 2-star pitcher. If Adrian Hauser gets the boot and the Mets go 5-man next week and not 6-man, then Budo could end up making a 2nd start against the Braves. But the Braves lineup isn't as dangerous as usual right now. And again, that first start is at St. Louis. So Budo, a sleeper pitcher, pencil him in for 1 start, but it may end up being 2.
Scott, it was right there for you. If Adrian Hauser gets the boot, so.
My head was not in it. Sorry.
I'm sorry. I can't make those jokes. I'm not a dad. I'm a cat dad. So I don't know. Maybe I can make those jokes. I did want to mention quickly with Patrick Sandoval that our buddy Lance Brozdowski, who we had on the podcast recently, in his newsletter with his pitcher notes, pointed out that Sandoval has made a pitch mix change recently, fading his 4-seam fastball, throwing his slider a lot more. And his ERA estimators, 3.17 FIP, 3.82 xERA. I don't know that I buy it completely, but there could be something there with Patrick Sandoval. And as you mentioned, pretty good matchups next week, 34% rostered. Single start streamers, there are 3 names here. So if you miss out on the 2-star pitchers, who are some single start streamers you can look at?
So Spencer Turnbull against the Blue Jays, who have just been terrible offensively, even though we don't think of the Blue Jays as a bad offensive team. Hopefully Spencer Turnbull at least gets that turn because it's a good matchup. John Gray. I think John Gray is the 2nd best 1-start sleeper this week. And it's amazing that I'm saying that because he's at Colorado. And I think that really speaks to how bad the Rockies offense is. It speaks to how bad the options are for sleeper pitchers this week. But John Gray has a lot of experience at Colorado, obviously. And so if any pitcher is going to come in there and handle himself, it would probably be him. I also think Eric Fetty against the Guardians. Tough matchup, at least based on how they've performed so far. But I'd rather start Eric Fetty than a lot of the 1-start options you could pick up off waivers, even acknowledging that it's not the best matchup.
Where does Eric Fetty rank overall in your sleeper pitchers this week?
5th.
Okay. And just to, I guess, back up what you're saying about these options this week, I think I would prefer Eric Fetty over any of the other names that you mentioned, just because it's a combination of, I don't know, some of the matchups are weird. I don't trust these pitchers. But again, I understand people are looking for options. I might put Eric Fetty at the top of this list just based on how he's pitched so far this season. The best hitter matchups for next week, the Rangers, the Royals, the Cardinals, the Mariners, and the Pirates. The worst hitter matchups, Blue Jays, Nationals, Marlins, Cubs, and the Braves. With that said, who are your sleeper hitters for week 7?
Okay, Jorge Soler actually qualifies for this list now, which I was kind of surprised to hear. The Giants weren't among the team with the best 5 matchups, but they have 3 games at Colorado. They're one of not so many teams playing 7 games. And Soler's power production has been fine at least. So I think it's a good time to roll the dice on him. If he was dropped in your league, I like Andy Pajes this week just because I think he's undervalued. The Dodgers matchups are decent enough. They're facing the back end of the Marlins rotation for 3 games, and then Michael King and Matt Waldron from the Padres rotation. So I think Andy Pajas could do some damage with that. The Rangers matchups, you mentioned they're the best. They're by far the best. At Oakland for 4, at Colorado for 3.
Wow.
Nate Lowe is the only name I could come up with from their lineup that is available in enough leagues to mention here. There's also Leody Taveras, but he's been doing nothing. So I didn't put him in my 10 sleeper hitters, but he's out there in a lot of leagues if you want to take advantage of those Rangers matchups.
Please, Wyatt Langford next week, please.
I got Joe Adell on here, sort of like Andy Pajas, just undervalued. His matchups are decent enough. Ty France. We've talked before about how the StatCast numbers look great on him, and he just hasn't really gotten results yet. But I think they're coming, and I think this week could be a good one for them. The Mariners have the 4th best matchups at Minnesota for 4 and against the A's for 3. The Cardinals having the 3rd best matchups and only 1 left-hander on the schedule. I'm going to recommend Lars Nootbaar and Nolan Gorman for this week, hoping it turns out like it did for Anthony Rizzo last week, and that those good matchups are enough to get them going still. I think Lars Nootbaar and Nolan Gorman are going to deliver at some point, and these matchups might be the start of it. The Rockies are at home, legitimately at home, not in Mexico City for a full week. And Brenton Doyle has been their best hitter at home this year, so I'm going to put him on here. And then a couple of highly, highly available options, almost 90% of CBS sports leagues. Richard Palacios. We're very formal at CBS. That's how we list him, Richard Palacios. And the Rays have really good matchups. Only 1 left-hander on the schedule. He sits against left-handers. He's been solid this year, delivering speed and getting on base a lot. And then Tommy Pham, rounding out the list here, also highly available. The White Sox are a team with 7 games and good matchups in those 7 games. So, yeah, Tommy Pham's looked good so far with the White Sox. Hopefully he'll keep it going for a 7-game week.
All right, let's wrap up with some leftovers and just quickly run through some hitters. Gleyber Torres is on the board. He went 1 for 3 with his first home run of the season. Nico Horner, starting to run a little bit. 1 for 4 with 2 walks and 2 steals. He now has 3 steals over his last 2 games. So that's great.
I almost made him my oh my goodness gracious just for those 2 steals. You know, it's good. As I say often, but maybe not often enough, stolen bases aren't evenly distributed over the course of the year, and you could get a lot over a short span of time. And hopefully this is the start of a run of running for Nico Horner.
And it certainly looks like it's the start of a run for Christopher Morel, who went 1 for 4 with a sock and a shoe. He hit his 5th home run and added his 3rd stolen base. And in the series against the Mets, he had 2 homers and 2 steals. We spoke the other day about the plate discipline improved for Christopher Morel, and I still think he's a player that you should be looking to buy on right now if you could. A quick bullpen update for the Giants. Camilo Doval struck out 1 for his 6th save, and that's it. Those are all the bullpen updates for today. To stream or not to stream on Friday, and I believe we said this was a pretty gross day of streaming. Well, yeah. Martin Perez is facing the Rockies in Pittsburgh. I think that's okay. I like what we've seen from Reese Olson, but at the Yankees...
I'd still start Olson over any of these others, even though the matchups aren't as good. I don't know. Close call between him and Martin Perez. That Rockies matchup is particularly away from Coors Field is so favorable. If I had to pick a third from Friday... I would not pick a third from Friday. I guess I have no idea. I don't like anyone else. I'll say
I think one of the 2 lefties, Ryan Weathers or JP Sears, facing.
Yeah, let's say Sears against the Marlins. Yeah.
On Saturday, we do have quite a few options here. Brandon Pfaadt is going up against the Padres. Zach Littell is going up against the Mets. Keaton Wynn has pitched well. He's at the Phillies. Paul Blackburn gets the Marlins. Trevor Rogers gets the Oakland A's. Eric Fetty at the Cardinals.
That's an easy one. Fetty at the Cardinals.
Clark Schmidt against the Tigers. I think there's a lot of options on Saturday. No, Scott, come back. Where are you?
Oh my gosh.
We'll never know about the Saturday streamers.
It's ridiculous.
All right, you're back.
Okay.
I was just trying to fill
Right.
time until you were back.
Fetty at the Cardinals. Brandon Pfaadt. No, not Brandon Pfaadt. Fetty at the Cardinals. Keaton Wynn at the Phillies. Brandon Pfaadt against the Padres.
All right, and Sunday we have Ryan Feltner at the Pirates. I mean, it could work out. He pitched well against the Marlins. Bailey Falter gets the Rockies in Pittsburgh. And then Javier Assad has pitched well. He's facing the Brewers. Dean Kramer has been okay, but he's in Cincinnati. I don't love Sunday.
Yep. It's getting harder, I think.
Sean Manaea at Tampa Bay is okay, I guess.
It's getting harder to find streamer recommendations we feel good about as now that the wheat has been separated from the chaff on the waiver wire, and all the good pitchers have been picked up. Not that there will never be any other good ones on the waiver wire, but not at the same rate as before.
Yeah, and I think that was a pretty long way of saying do not stream anybody on Sunday if you don't have to. But if I had to choose, I would go probably Manaea, Falter, and let's say Javier Assad. We're going to wrap there for Scott. I am Frank. Thanks as always for tuning in to Fantasy Baseball today. Please make sure to follow and leave a 5-star rating on Apple or Spotify. And we will be back again next week. Bye-bye.